Welcome to the Improve Our podcast. I'm your host, Daniela Tancău, an HR consultant helping entrepreneurs and team leaders build motivated, high-performing teams. Here we talk about leadership, employee motivation, and other topics that enhance your ability to lead. Whether you are an entrepreneur with a team, a business owner planning to build one, or a leader in a company. You'll gain practical advice and insights from me and my guests, experts in the field and entrepreneurs who share their leadership experiences. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on every episode. Let's dive into today's topic. Hi, welcome back to the Improve Our podcast. This episode's guest is Team Toterhi, and we talk about HR departments, what their roles are in a company, who should be part of them, whom the HR department should report to, and much more. And we choose this topic because there is often a confusion about how HR professionals can help a company and what to expect from an HR department. And Tim brings his rich experience as a Chief Human Resources Officer to this topic. He's an executive advisor with over 20 years of experience in organizations from America, Europe, and Asia. And in addition to helping companies as a fractional Chief Human Resources Officer, stabilizing and developing HR departments, he also supports them in changing culture, enhancing performance, and optimizing talent. Tim is also a career coach, a speaker, and an author. He has written books to help people with their careers, and his talents extend beyond the HR field because he's also written several novels. And I notice how his novelist writing skills nicely blend into his service presentations, and I assume even into his company's name. Check out his website to learn more about his books, about his coaching and consultancy services. The link is in this episode's notes. Welcome to the podcast, team. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
And because you have extensive experience helping companies with their HR teams, we'll discuss about HR departments, right? And we'll discuss about the roles they play in companies, how they can be created, and much more. And my first question for you is, what are the main roles of an HR department in a company, in an ideal situation?
Well, it's a complex question because it really depends on the size of the company, right? I mean, if you think about an organization of maybe 1 to 50 employees, you may not even have an HR person in that type of organization. You may have a finance person doing payroll, and then they're trying to figure everything else out and outsource some things and work on it. And that often happens. Not always the best solution, but it's pretty common folks to do that. But then once an organization grows beyond that 50 level and you think 50 to 100, 150, to me, that's really where the true heroes of HR come into play because you have that N of one generalist that has to try to do everything all at once, right? And they're having to do not only hiring people, which is usually for those type of companies, scaling people in and doing a lot of hiring, but then they do everything in between hiring and retiring folks, right? And letting them go one way or the other. So they have to deal with not only all the policies and processes and procedures, but then all the cyclical events that go on. So performance management and compensation and talent and understanding all of the HR laws and doing that as an N of one generalist or HR business partner is really tough for them to do. And then you get into that third level where an organization begins to scale. And again, I've worked in organizations of 50 people to 50,000 people. And when you get really large, that's when your HR team can become incredibly complex. And you start to see not only specialization in HR BPs, but then the different COEs. So as an example, you might have a separate COE just for compensation, but within that, a structure where somebody's focusing solely on executive comp and sales comp, and then you have somebody focusing on benefits or a certain type of benefit for different countries, get really complex. So I think the good news is HR can be an amazing career for anybody, whether you want to go really broad or really deep in a specialty. So it's kind of a cool place to be. So, so what's the ideal? The ideal is the one that fits your company.
Mm-hmm. But can you name like top five functions of an HR department?
Sure. If I look at a regular size organization, you're certainly going to want to have your HR BPs that are going to run your operational functions. And I think of that as your cyclical processes. So
Mm-hmm.
everything from once people are hired and onboarded, then thinking about performance and compensation and talent management and succession planning and all the things that happen on a calendar, right? And while
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that, also thinking about the things that pop up. So your employee relations cases. So all of your HR operations. The other things that you're going to want in an organization are then those COEs that I spoke about. And here, again, you may have a separate COE for staffing that focuses just on that. That may extend a little bit into talent management where they do a little bit of onboarding. You're then going to want a whole COE folks focusing on training and development. So your
Mm-hmm.
L&D folks. And that could take two functions. Your operational HR, so where you're thinking about L&D training for the business on what they do, and then also the general things around management, leadership, culture, vision, all of those things, the softer side. So think about hard skills, soft skills. So you have staffing, you have L&D. I mentioned compensation, huge
Mm-hmm.
area, right? Where you're going to want a specialization for that. And then I would actually take benefits and put that aside because it's so different and so much more complex that you're going to want specialists there. And then if you have all of that, HR, it's funny, we use more systems than almost any other part of the business next to operations. Right? Think about all the systems that HR uses. You need expertise there. So you're going to need your HR workforce analytics people who can run, not only implement systems, but keep them running, keep them aligned with IT, all of that. So those are
Mm-hmm.
your basics at a very, very level there. But then, HR does so much more, right? You start to think about strategic HR and you get into a world of now you're looking at OD. You're looking at things like M&A preparation, due diligence, implementation, post acquisition, all of those things. And then, it's funny, I like to say sometimes that HR isn't HR anymore, right? It used to be, if you think about it, we were the people that were personnel, right? HR was the folks that planned the parties and then wrote
Yes.
everybody up because they drank too much at them, right? Well, it's funny. It's the same thing that IT used to be, right? IT years ago used to be the kid that plugged in the projector. Well, the world changed for them and it changed for us too. So HR is insanely more complex. If you think about what HR does now, we think about not only legal, right? All of the legal ramifications that we have to do. We're involved in marketing with social media and messaging, communications, IT. There's not really an avenue within the organization that HR doesn't bump up against directly or at least indirectly. And so, it's a huge area. So to answer that question, I mean, you have to build a foundation and then you earn the right to kind of go into those strategic levels where you could really make a difference in an organization. And so there's a lot to do in an
Mm-hmm.
HR
Yes.
organization.
Right. From my experience, there are three functions that are questionable and different from company to company. For example, benefits,
Yeah.
compensations, training, and as you said, events, employees' events. What
Yeah.
is your perspective on this?
So you said training, benefits, and then employee events.
Yes, yes.
So it's interesting. I'm not a big fan of HR in the party planning business at all, right? So I think that is a something that they did when they were known as personnel, and they got involved in that. I think we do play a role in navigating the vision of an organization, how that's aligned to the strategy of an organization, and how that plays out within the culture day to day. But that's
Mhm.
very, very different than organizing a pizza lunch or something like that. HR has no business doing that, right?
But yes, I understand. But what about team buildings, events?
Team building is important if it's purposeful. So
Mhm.
not one of the trainers in the world that likes to do team building because it's something to put on the agenda for a 2-day meeting and you have to fill some space and you're trying to do something. I think team building is purposeful when it's in service of what the goal is for the team in the project that they're trying to run. So team building, just to, trust falls and all those things, they don't really do anything because then you leave and you might know somebody, but you can get that same discussion and input if you went out and had a dinner with somebody. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's better when a team gets together. And again, FaceTime is precious, right? Because we're doing things on video like we're doing now. Everything is automated. So if I'm going to get people in a room to actually work, I want it to be worthy of the time and the expense that they're going to have to do that. And so when we talk about team building, I want them to work on a project together. I want them to make a meaningful, contribution together so that they can have some ownership around that. And they'll feel much better about that than,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we built out something out of paper mache and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really do
Mm-hmm.
anything for us. So I come into things from that level. I think it's important that it's really purposeful and meaningful and they have an outcome at the end of it.
So you make a separation between events for socializing and create a connection outside the work, and team buildings that are purposed and they have some goals. Uh,
Absolutely. And you make a
yes.
really good point. So that I like the way that you phrase that around the separation. So if you're conducting a meeting, one of the big problems that meeting planners run into, and when HR organizes the agenda, is we overpack an agenda for a team meeting, where we have too many presentations, we have too many team buildings, and we don't allow enough white space for people to actually interact. So if
Mm-hmm.
you think about it, you want to have really good meaty content where folks are talking, they're engaging, they're working through an issue. And if they're getting someone's presenting to them, it's because they want to spark an insight or spark an idea. Then
Mm-hmm.
they need time to digest that, go into the hallway, go into the coffee break, go into have something where they can actually talk about that and see, hey, that was a really good point. How would I apply that in my business? And that's what great speakers do is they prompt you with some insights and then they pause and they let you think about how you might apply those in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. I wanted to mention this because some companies think differently than us HR people. They think that compensations have to be managed by an accountant department, and
Mhm.
it should be run by that department. And also, yes, marketing department can be involved in events. So my next question is how is the reality different from what you said before? Because I saw many companies that have HR people that just manage hiring and the legal stuff, and the other
Mhm.
functions are left. They are not even approached by the companies.
Yeah, it's a really good point you're making about just the reality. You can have a great idea of how you want to structure your HR department, and then that bumps up against what the company can afford, what the company is facing, and what, frankly, leaders are comfortable allowing within their organization or wanting. And sometimes people don't know what they want. Oftentimes, what happens is we hyper focus on the tactical because we need to. So if you think about an early stage company, they're going to be really focused on hiring. And that's where they're going to want all of their HR people to focus on. We need to get people onboarded. We need to get them in. So sourcing and hiring and interviewing and onboarding, and then that's it. And we forget about them. Big mistake, right? We need to not forget about the strategic elements that happen after the tactical, because you can find yourself in trouble where if, let's say, we have a promise that we give out to potential employees, and we say, if you come here, you're going to get this. And then we do all the work to get them in the organization, and they land and they don't see what we promised. They're going to leave, right? So it would behoove us to spend a little bit of time on shoring up, and this is an OD work, is that we make sure that what we promise to potential employees actually becomes a reality. And that takes organization design, that takes a little bit of talent management. To your point about learning and development, all of that requires some investment to make sure. Otherwise, you're going to be in a hamster wheel and you'll never get off of it. So if you want to grow, you have to invest.
Mm-hmm. I know that you work with many companies and with HR departments, and I'm curious to know what are the main challenges of HR departments, what are their main issues, and how did you intervene and find solutions for that issues?
It's a really interesting question because it's nuanced, right? Every company is going to have a different set of issues based on a few factors, right? The size of the organization and where they are. So, yeah, as a consultant, oftentimes you walk into organizations when they're in flux. Very rarely do you come into a place where everything is working well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, right? They need a temporary head of HR and you go in and you stabilize and you maybe do a project or two and then you get the person that they need to grow. Fine, that happens. But oftentimes you're going in because of one or two things. They're in a massive growth spurt, right? And they need somebody to level up their team. And that includes processes, right? So how do I go from hiring one or two people here and there to I want to scale my organization by hundreds? That takes a different mindset of things that we talked about. So how do I build in systems and processes and tools and make sure that my people can actually hire folks and all of that. So there's growth issues that are associated with that and making sure that everything connects. And then there's other situations where things aren't going so well, right? And you're in a turnaround scenario where there's a problem and you need somebody to parachute in to fix it. And that can run any part of your HR organization. You've run afoul on some compensation issues. You have a problem with some of your processes that are broken. You have a new system. And again, remember I mentioned that you have these HR generalists who are amazing at what they do, but they need to sleep every once in a while, right? So it's really hard to run a whole organization and then say, oh, yeah, while you're doing this, let's look at a potential acquisition. Let's put in a new HR system. Let's revamp our strategy. Totally different. And in fairness, usually not what they do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's typically what happens is HR runs that risk of it having an issue when there's change. And so if you're very comfortable with that, then that's where you can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you work with a new company, with a new client, and they ask you to build an HR department, and they have around 50 employees, what people would you hire in this department, and why? And what qualification would you look for in these people?
So for an organization of 50, right, and I would do the same thing regardless of what size the organization is, but I tend to look at three questions. When the first one is if I'm sticking around to help them in the long term, right? I want to make sure that if that's there, if I'm a factor in that. And the reason that there is it's important. So the first thing is I look at the stage of the organization. So we mentioned kind of where are they? Are they in a growth scenario? Are they trying to fix a problem in a downturn? Or are they in a place where they just want some steady eddy growth, right? Three different scenarios, but they require a different skill set for the HR team that you're going to build, right? The second thing is that you have to ask is, well, what does a business really require from HR? Some organizations are going to want a very high touch with their HR people. They're going to want, hands-on training. They're going to want to have people in classrooms. They're going to want to have ER issues that are serviced by people face to face, right? Their location, all of that. If they're geographically spread huge, well, they might be relying on, chatbots and having, IT infrastructure. So you really have to be thoughtful about what stage are they? What do they really want from an HR organization? And then to the point I made around, hey, if I'm going to stick around and lead this, then I build the team around what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think as leaders, right, we've both been around. We don't know everything. You might have specialties, but I want to build a team that can complement what I do, not overlap what I do.
All
And
right.
so all of that is important. But if I was going in tomorrow to an organization that had 50 people, I'd make sure that they had a really strong HRBP, someone who knew the laws of the local country, right, wherever we are. And Europe is going to be different than the US and different in different places in Asia. What are those laws? And can I run a cyclical event? Can I keep all the wheels on the bus? I'm a big proponent of HR not doing payroll. I actually like that with finance. If anytime I can get rid of it, I'm all for it, right? I think HR should sign up for the strategy of how people get paid and compensation analysis, but there's no need for us to do that if we don't have to, right? There should be checks and balances, but it's important. So that's what I would do is I'd have definitely an N of one person and then supplement that with the type of work that you need based on your situation. So quick example, if I put in a really strong HRBP to run a group of 50 people and then they want to put in a new system, let's make sure we have the expertise that can help us do that. If they think about going through an acquisition, they're probably going to need some external help to be able to do that. And that's really important just to kind of make sure that you have the right people on your team.
And for example, for an HR generalist, what qualification, what qualities should this person have?
You know, it's interesting. There's obviously, all of the certifications that you have out there. I'm less enamored with people having a certain degree or a certain level of certifications. That there's the big ones out there that people have. What I look for is the ability to do, right? So a
Mm-hmm.
proven track record that you've done it. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
a HR generalist and you've worked in a place it's actually it helps me to know that you can do an organization where you're the only one. And it's very different between being a HR business partner in a 50,000 person company where you
Mm-hmm.
can walk down the hall and ask a senior colleague for an answer. Or if you're at 1,000 person company and you have a couple of other people where you can bounce ideas off of. The reason why I think these N of one HR generalists are so remarkable is because they can find out, right? They're natural connectors. So they're plugged into your SHRMs and your HRCIs and all of that. They know what the information is and they can go find out. And that to me is the biggest quality. You're not going to know everything, but if you have a
Mm-hmm.
plan to be able to go get it through your network, through your information, most valuable skill, right? The rest you can learn. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
I think really important is that ability to go get it.
Yes, I think that this point is very important because I saw companies that move people from other roles in HR roles without having experience and without providing the necessary training. And if
Hmm.
you see this situation, if you find yourself in this situation, having a new member in the HR team without uh, experience and without training in this field, what would you do to train this person to have the necessary knowledge? And of course, it depends on the role this person has in the department. But if this person is in a small company and has to manage a lot of HR tasks.
Yeah, so there's so many things as we mentioned that HR is responsible for. You touch on a really good point is you have to go get the training. There's a saying, it's very popular in the US, you probably hear it all the time, but fake it till you make it. That saying, it's the worst advice you could possibly give somebody because people are going to instantly know that you're faking what you're doing. So if there is an ER case that comes up and you don't have experience running ER cases, you need to plug into folks who can do that. There's a wealth of information to be able to do that. And frankly, that's one of the good things with technology. We have an abundance of training opportunities, whether it's on a LinkedIn Learning or one of the online Moodle classes that you have. All of these things are out there to go out and get training on the specific thing. And again, an ER case is going to look different than how do I use Chat GPT to put my the hiring criteria in, and how do I run a job description and all of those things, right? You're if you're signing up to work in HR, you're signed up to be a lifelong learner. And no matter where you are, whether you're an N of one HR person at a 20-person company, or you're at a 100,000 person company with a 600 person HR team, you've got to constantly update your skills. That's on it for all of us all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but some people just learn the basic and they go with that basic stuff without developing other knowledge, and they wonder why they don't do so well in their roles.
Yeah, and it's scary, right? Because the world has changed dramatically even over the last 12 months. I mean, you have to keep on top of the new technologies, the new
Mm-hmm.
things that are coming out, because your role is changing daily, and you just need to be
Mm-hmm.
able to be flexible and learn new things. And hey, everybody has to do it. So that's just the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm. And also related to the HR department functions, uh, who should run the HR department? And I don't refer to the HR manager. Uh, the HR manager, who should respond to?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, it certainly depends a little bit on the size of the organization, but in general, I'm a big fan of whoever's heading your HR organization, be it a director or a head of HR, CHRO, they should report into the CEO. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, and it's really important that they have that level within the organization because, frankly, you need to have that same level of gravitas, same level of input when you're navigating things. Think about what happens all the time between finance, operations, sales, right? All of those discussions that happen there, HR needs to weigh in because they always have a people element. And so it's really important that HR does have that direct line and connection to the CEO. Now, having said that, there is another school of thought that says a good CEO, especially for growth-oriented companies, wants to be externally focused. And because they're going to be primarily externally focused, they're going to have a closer relationship with your sales organization, with your corporate development, with your partnerships, and all of that is fine. And in those instances, what you see is a COO kind of come up where you have a chief operating officer there. Some people will like to put the HR into that role, and I think it's a bad idea. Because if you think about the COO, they're focused internally on operations. That's in their whole job title, right? They're going to always focus there, which is where they should. All of the other functions will get second class citizenship, if you will. And that's not what you want. So, what we've seen is when the companies get large enough, if you're trying to keep a CEO's direct reports minimal, right, you'd start to see a CAO role come in. And to me, then that makes sense if you have your HR, your legal, your finance, your IT all dove into that, because then you have three voices really within the organization, and internally focused and externally focused and operationally focused, and that can align that. But HR has to have enough power in any of those setups so that they can be a voice of reason to actually kind of put together some disputes that happen. What happens all the time? Sales says something, operations says there's no way we can deliver it, and finance says there's no way we can pay for it. If HR is not there, you're going to run afoul. So it's really important to have that kind of a focus. So HR needs to be there.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Yes. Uh, and one last question. How do you know how do we know that an HR department is working well, that it's doing well? How we should evaluate an HR department?
You have to put together a really clear scorecard for metrics and what you're going to measure. And there's no magic scorecard for what you do, right? Every organization is going to be different, but I think you have to pay attention to what's most important. And so I'll take an example of like turnover. Every HR department in the world trying to measures turnover. But I think you have to put a metric like that in context. And you say, well, what does good look like? Some organizations say we want no turnover. We want people to stay here forever. And other organizations might look at it and say, you know what, our sweet spot is 3 years. We want people to turn over between 3 and 5 years because before that, they're not ready, they're not contributing enough, and after that, too expensive. There's no right answer, but you have to know what data you're looking to capture. So I think that's important. The other thing that is important is who really owns the metric. So sometimes we as HR inherit metrics that we shouldn't own. So as an example, we'll look at things like time to fill, another staffing metric, and we get 100% of the issue for that, 100% of the responsibility. But my question would be is that an HR metric or is that a management metric? Because we've all, if you've hired anybody in the world, you know that when a requisition comes up and it's one person, we would say, oh, that's going to be easy. We'll fill that in an hour because this person has people lined up to work for him. He's just a phenomenal manager. It's great. And then other situations where a rec comes open and we sigh and go, we're never going to fill this. Nobody wants to work for this person. It is horrible, horrible management, constant turnover, right? That's the reality. So it's the difference between what's in the metric and what's in the reality of the organization. So I think that managers do own a little bit of that time to fill. If they have some gravity that pulls people in, boy, that's really helpful. But in general, when you're thinking about metrics for HR, I think you have to make the difference between efficiency metrics. So things like how much, how many, how fast, all of that, versus effectiveness measures that tell us sort of like how well we're doing, how meaningful it is. And then if you want to layer it a step even over, you can start to think about what are the outcomes. So, what are the true business outcomes that we want and put in measures around that. And you can have those as examples all across the scorecard, whether it's hiring, training, rewarding, or retaining people in the organization.
Right. Yes, these are good metrics, and I think that everyone can guide themselves following them. And of course, there are other metrics, but in general, these are top.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Tim, for sharing your knowledge and for your answers. And can you share how can people get in touch with you if they are interested to know more about you and your business?
Sure, absolutely. You can log on to plotlineleadership.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. One of the advantages of having Toterhi as a last name is I'm the only one on the planet. So it's Tim Toterhi, and you'll find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to connect with and work with anybody there.
Thank you very much. It was very nice to talk with you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you found value in this podcast, subscribe to stay updated. I'm grateful for your support and hope to continue providing content that helps you grow. See you in the next episode.